So, let's make a start. So, good morning everybody and welcome to this event. My name is David Walsh and it is my pleasant task to open the proceedings here today and to start this 2019 Conference of Men's Voices and to start the proceedings underway. Men's Voices went through a difficult period since our conference here in 2017. We lost some key people through a variety of causes, through emigration, or through pressure of work, or even hostility to what we were doing. But we are still here. The last 2 years have seen the enactment of more repressive legislation. The Domestic Violence Act 2018 hardly raised a murmur on the floor of the Dáil, apart from expressions of praise. There was no debate on its provisions, no attempt to scrutinise the complexities of, say, coercive control. It all passed off amid effusions of applause for those who proposed the provisions. Deputies smiled, nodded their heads in agreement. The Istanbul Convention, which came into force on the 1st of July, caused even less discussion. It wasn't even mentioned in the Oireachtas. It went through into legislation by stealth, as it were, like a thief in the night. The most repressive, totalitarian piece of legislation that has ever been enacted in this country, I believe. It's a document which is reminiscent of nothing so much as Article 58 of the Criminal Code of the former USSR, which is the only comparable act I can think of. This is the act of which Solzhenitsyn spoke as follows: "Who among us has not experienced its all-encompassing embrace?" In all truth, there is no step, thought, action, or lack of action under the heavens which could not be punished under the heavy hand of Article 58. I don't think it's an exaggeration to speak of the Istanbul Convention in the same breath as Article 58. The Convention is of a similar scope. It's similarly broad in its comprehensiveness. And given the fact that we are supposed to be living in a democracy, it is of a similar severity. It's all the more reprehensible then that the Convention was drawn up and formulated by a body, the Council of Europe, which of all things is supposed to be a human rights body. Of course, the media was just as craven as the politicians in this respect. Those who loudly claimed to be the protectors of free speech imposed an iron silence on all dissent. In regard to some of our activities over the past 2 years, we were one of the first to blow the whistle on Amen back in April 2017, when we first became aware of the appalling incompetence that was going on there. We informed the powers that be, the authorities that fund Amen, about our misgivings about what was going on. Action, although very belated, was taken eventually. In March of 2018, the board of Amen was dissolved. Sorry, in October of 2018, the board of Amen was dissolved. And in June of 2019, a new body, Anyman, was launched. Anyman has gotten off to a good start. Hopefully that ghastly period is now over, and we wish Anyman every success in the future. In April 2018, we discovered by means of a parliamentary question the appalling reality that of the total state funding that went to services for the victims of domestic violence in 2017, of the total state funding, 1.4% went to services for male victims. 1.4%. That is the reality of what is happening here. We along with many other omissions, this is one statistic that you will not hear mention of in the Craven, in the servile media. We tried to highlight this on our website, and by handing out leaflets, as we did on the occasion of the 2 visits that Jordan Peterson made to Dublin in 2018. Twice in the last 9 months, we were called on by radio stations to put forward the names of men who would be willing to speak of their experience of domestic abuse. Unfortunately, on both occasions, we were able to furnish, to oblige, to furnish people who would come forward. Nevertheless, progress in the recognition of male victims of domestic abuse remains painfully slow and tortuous. We were called to hearings of the Oireachtas Justice Committee, which were held to discuss reform of the family law in March last. We were, of course, delighted to take part in these hearings because family law reform has been one of our key objectives since we began. We were accompanied to the hearings of the Justice Committee by a group, Nemo Forum, and I'm glad to say some of them are here with us today. The report of the Justice Committee actually only came out last month, and it did make some worthy recommendations, and it did mention some of the concerns that we had expressed. It remains to be seen whether these recommendations are translated into effective legislation. We've had many disappointments. Unfortunately, disappointment is an experience all too often encountered by male advocacy groups in whatever area they care to be, they may be engaged in, whether that be with the media, or with state agencies, or with the political system. At our last conference in 2017, we predicted that the next assault would be in the legal sphere, on due process, which is a fundamental principle of our legal system and a cornerstone of a liberal democracy. This began less than 1 year later. Following the Belfast trial in March 2018 and the outbreak of fury on social media, which greeted the acquittal of the accused men, a document appeared. It was commissioned by the Rape Crisis Network of Ireland. It was prepared by a panel drawn up by them. It included legal people, representatives of the Gardaí, but with a heavy presence drawn from the RCNI itself and kindred bodies. We could have guessed what kind of report this panel would produce. Nevertheless, it did come as something of a shock when it appeared. The document was about special treatment for so-called vulnerable witnesses. It called for the pre-recording of evidence and for cross-examination to be pre-recorded, to be recorded pre-trial also, among many other provisions which would be detrimental to the rights of the accused. It would mean, for example, that the complainant need not attend the trial at all. But curiously, though the stated purpose of these provisions was concern for compassion for victims, this compassion did not extend to victims of other types of assault. For instance, to victims of violent assault on the streets, for instance. It did not apply to these people. There was no mention of that, and no parallel was drawn. The Minister deferred to the RCNI as expected, and he announced a review of procedures in September of 2018. Men's Voices made a submission to the committee charged with the review, and that submission can be found on our website. The report of that committee is still awaited, but we expect that it will appear sometime in the new year, early in the new year. We consider this issue so important that we devoted 2 talks in this conference to the matter. We regard it as nothing less than an assault on the principle, on the right of a fair trial, and on the presumption of innocence. At this point, I want to make a call for volunteers to help with our work. In making this call, I'm reminded of an advertisement that Ernest Shackleton is said to have put out back in 1914 when he was seeking volunteers for his celebrated expedition to the Antarctic, the famous endurance expedition. The advertisement read as follows: men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. The story goes that he was swamped with applications. I think it's a great story, but I'm not sure about the truth of it. While I wouldn't try to draw a parallel with Shackleton's epic undertaking, I do think it's possible to make some comparison. The work is equally difficult, or is difficult anyway. It's difficult work. The returns are scarce, or at any rate the returns are not immediate. There's a lot of painful toil without quick reward. Nevertheless, there have been real success in the 4 years of our existence. We pride ourselves on having made an impact. Men are suffering. Of that there is no doubt. They are suffering either through neglect, or through bad laws, or through a combination of both. Some commit suicide. Others spend years in a kind of limbo waiting for their cases to be heard. Their lives are put on duration for the hold. There are almost no state services, supports for such men undergoing such trials. There's an enormous amount of work waiting to be done in a whole range of areas, but we lack the manpower, the resources to make a real impact. One of the most underappreciated roles today is that of the good father, the role that fatherhood plays in the development of children, but particularly in the lives of boys. The research in this area is overwhelming, but still we hear almost nothing about the damage that father absence plays in the lives of children, particularly in the lives of boys. We need people, we need men in particular, to write about this topic, to speak about it on radio, to talk to parents' councils, parents' organizations, community groups, about the importance of the role of fatherhood, and to stop the belittling of this role. Though a lot of effort often produces only meager results, we know we're not alone. Right across the Western world today, men's advocacy groups labour in an uphill struggle. But we support each other. And today it is common to have an international conference on men's issues every year. This year's event took place in Chicago back in August. It was a 3-day affair, and it featured a tremendous list of speakers. It shows the growing demand, the growing importance of events such as these. Karen Strawn, whom we are so lucky to have with us here today, actually spoke in Chicago. And she has just come from an International Men's Day conference in Oslo, where she spoke along with Warren Farrell. The event in Oslo was organised by a group called Man Forum, and get this, it was opened by a Norwegian politician, and one of the key talks was given by a Danish politician, and the title was, "Do the political parties need spokespersons for men's issues, just like they already have for women?" It was given by the politician Simon Simons. I'd like to ask you, which of our politicians would be the first to step forward and propose such a topic and speak on it? Can you imagine somebody stepping forward and talking, asking the kind of questions that Simonson in Denmark and Philip Davis in England are now asking? Man Forum also told us this: we're in constant dialogue with state authorities and have got part of our financial support from them. Also, we have an institution called Free Word, which has sponsored us for this conference. Well, clearly, they are far ahead of us here. We have a lot to learn from them. We have other allies. Perhaps you've heard of the film The Red Pill, made by Cassie Jaye, which drew attention to men's issues in North America. The film received awards, but its screening was blocked by feminists in many, many places who objected to it being shown. It's a clear case of a fear of real debate, of the truth coming out. But for inspiration, one man stands out in the last few years as a beacon of hope to men everywhere. Jordan Peterson strives the world like a colossus. He has challenged false ideologies. He has accepted invitations from radio and TV in all of the 150 cities across the world that he has visited in the last 2 years, often from hostile interviewers. He has taken on the best that the woke media can put against him. He has left them baffled. Peterson too has had his setbacks. Only early this year, his fellowship at Cambridge University was withdrawn by the enemies of free speech. But he continues his work nevertheless. Before I finish, I want to make an appeal. It's a familiar appeal, and it's a bit distasteful. It's an appeal for funds, for money. We get no funding from any quarter, and we rely entirely on donations to help us organize events like today's event and to engage in the other activities that I have spoken about. If you feel that what we're doing is important, and if you feel that it makes a difference, then I would ask you, please donate what you can, either by way of the collection boxes which are in the room here, or by approaching me or one of the other members. We have put together a tremendous list of speakers for today's event. In doing so, we were mindful not just to address familiar topics, but also to challenge two menacing pieces of legislation. The first, the Istanbul Convention, which is already in place, already in law. And the second is a potential piece of legislation arising from the review of procedure in sexual assault trials that I've spoken about just now. In regard to our speakers, I have no doubt that their contributions will make an impact well into the future. I look forward to hearing what they have to say. I hope you find their talks interesting. And I thank you.